Hello and welcome to Fast and Factual. I'm Utsaf Parekh and I'll take you through the top stories of the day. We begin with news from the Israel-Hamas war. Israel Army Chief says that the country's forces are ready for a ground operation in Gaza. The Armed Forces Chief of Staff visited soldiers at an army base in South Israel. He said that the decision to launch the ground operation and the timing of the next stage will be taken together with the political leadership. Earlier, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant also told soldiers to be prepared. Israel has been amassing tanks and troops at the fenced border around the Gaza Strip for weeks now. The Gaza Health Ministry said Israeli airstrikes killed hundreds of people, mostly women and children, over the past day. The death toll in Gaza now stands at about 5,800. Palestinian authorities also say they received over 1,500 reports of missing people, including 870 children. They suggested that those missing could still be under the rubble. UNICEF's regional director has urged both sides to agree to an immediate ceasefire. She said that the rate of child deaths and injuries in Gaza is staggering. She added that the number of child casualties were a growing stain on our collective conscience. The fourth convoy carrying humanitarian aid and essential supplies was allowed into Gaza late Tuesday. It consisted of 8 trucks. The United Nations had earlier said that about 20 trucks had been unable to cross into Gaza. The Palestine Red Crescent Society volunteers were seen distributing the aid. Supplies of food, water, medicines and fuel have been running critically low in the Gaza Strip. Doctors in Gaza say patients arriving at hospitals are showing signs of disease caused by overcrowding and poor sanitation. More than 1.4 million Palestinians have fled their homes and moved to temporary shelters amid the heavy bombardment by Israel. Campsites in Gazan cities have become home to those who fled, with thousands packed into each of the sites. Gaza faces the risk of a health crisis as medicines and supplies are limited. The Israeli ambassador to the United Nations demanded the resignation of Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. The Israeli envoy accused the UN chief of failing to condemn atrocities on Israeli civilians. The envoy said that the UN was established to prevent atrocities and unless Guterres apologizes, there was no justification to its existence. Israel's condemnation comes after Guterres said that the Hamas attack did not happen in a vacuum. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke to members of the UN Security Council. He urged the nations to use their influence to secure the unconditional and immediate release of hostages held by Hamas. Blinken also asked the UNSC to consider a US-led resolution that calls for humanitarian pauses to let aid into Gaza, but not a full ceasefire. The Iranian ambassador to the UN accused Washington of wrongly attempting to blame Tehran for the October 7th Hamas attack. The Iranian envoy rejected the allegations and called them groundless. Iran added that America's unwavering support to Israel made it complicit in the brutal massacre of Palestinians in Gaza. Iran also claimed that Israel was an occupying power and so it had no right to self-defense in Gaza under the UN Charter. Arab leaders attending the U.S. Security Council meeting called for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. They voiced concerns of a worsening humanitarian crisis. Top diplomats from Saudi Arabia, Egypt and Jordan put out a unified message. They urged for peace and said that more violence is not the answer. Hundreds of Palestinians protested French President Emmanuel Macron's visit to Ramallah in the West Bank. They were protesting against France and Europe's position on the Israel-Hamas war. Macron met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah. Before that, he had met with families of hostages held captive in Gaza and also held talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. In Jordan's capital Amman, hundreds of protesters took to the streets again. They gathered outside a mosque near the Israeli embassy to show support for the people of Gaza. The protesters waved the flags of Jordan and Palestine and chanted slogans in support of Palestinians. In other world news, the US Republican Party has picked its fourth candidate for the role of House Speaker in just 2 weeks. Louisiana's Mike Johnson has won the internal party vote, but so far lacks the 217 votes needed to win the Speaker's gavel. The previous nominee, Tom Emmer, buckled under backlash led by former US President Donald Trump and withdrew from the contest. 3 previous Republican nominees have failed to win the gavel. The party remains far from electing a new Speaker, even 3 weeks after Kevin McCarthy's historic ouster. US President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden welcomed Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to the White House. Biden invited Albanese on a state visit after he cut his trip to the Indo-Pacific in May short. He had cancelled a stop in Australia and returned to the White House for crucial budget talks with the US Congress. Albanese is now the 4th world leader to be honoured with a state visit during Biden's term. This is after the leaders of France, South Korea and India. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu visited the advanced command post of the Russian army in Donetsk. The frontline troops reported to Shoigu on the implementation of his instructions to create regular drone UAV units and to equip them with attack drones. Russian Defense Minister's frontline visit comes as the Russian army prepares for a winter campaign. As the war in Ukraine's east continues, Russian forces continue to pound eastern Ukraine cities in the Donetsk region. The Russian military also launched air attacks to assist advances by ground troops. Chinese President Xi Jinping says that Beijing is willing to cooperate with Washington. He added that whether or not the US and China could establish the right way of getting along would be crucial to the world. The Chinese president also called for more stable bilateral ties built on principles of mutual respect and peaceful coexistence. Hong Kong leader John Lee said that the semi-autonomous city would create its own national security law in 2024. This comes 4 years after Beijing imposed sweeping legislation aimed at silencing dissent. Massive pro-democracy protests had rocked Hong Kong in 2019. Hundreds of thousands of people had hit the streets calling for greater freedoms and more autonomy from mainland China. In response, Beijing imposed a national security law to punish 4 major crimes: secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. The Japanese government is considering spending around $33 billion for payouts to low-income households. This would come along with an income tax cut. These measures are a bid to cushion the blow to households from the rising cost of living. The spending plan is yet to be approved by Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's cabinet. This year, Japan has had an average inflation rate of 2.73%. It marks the highest rate of inflation the country has seen in almost a decade. A Panama court upheld a 128-month prison sentence for money laundering against former President Ricardo Martinelli. Martinelli is currently the frontrunner for Panama's presidential election next year. The court also upheld a $19.2 million fine Martinelli had been ordered to pay. The former Panama president was sentenced to more than 10 years in prison in July. This is for his role in a case known as New Business. It alleges that public funds were used to buy a media conglomerate and give the ex-president a majority stake. Crisis-hit Pakistan has requested Saudi Arabia to provide a $1 billion oil facility on deferred payment. This will be for the calendar year 2024. The request comes ahead of the review talks with the International Monetary Fund. The facility is part of the financing plan worked out with the IMF by Pakistani authorities. It's part of a $3 billion standby agreement with the IMF. Pakistan has been reeling under a severe economic crisis, with its foreign exchange reserves depleting rapidly. Meta Platforms, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, has been sued by a group of 33 US states. They claim Meta's social media platforms are exploiting young people for profit and feeding them harmful content. The lawsuit also says that Meta has repeatedly misled the public about substantial dangers of its social media platforms. Meta, however, says it's committed to keeping young people safe online and has introduced more than 30 tools to support them and their families. China will send its youngest ever crew of astronauts to its Tiangong space station this week. It's a crew of 3 led by astronaut Tang Hongbo, who's in his 40s. He'll be accompanied by 2 others who are both in their mid-30s. The 30-year-olds will be making their maiden space voyages. In climate news, Bolivian firefighters and volunteers are battling forest fires near a national park, which is also an Amazon rainforest reserve. There are about 16 active forest fires across the South American nation. Areas around Bolivia's capital, La Paz, have been hit the hardest. A volcano near Naples in Italy is exhibiting signs of awakening. It's causing concern with noxious fumes and regular tremors. Scientists are closely monitoring the volcanic activity, though an imminent eruption is not expected. Locals are adapting to daily tremors, and Italy's Civil Protection Agency has raised the eruption risk level to yellow. There was a brief improvement in the air quality around India's capital New Delhi on Tuesday. Despite this, Delhi residents anticipate a deterioration in the coming days. Locals believe pollution levels will worsen due to the upcoming Diwali festival and the winter season. Diwali typically sees a surge in firecracker usage. There are also rounds of burning at agricultural fields nearby to ready the soil for the winter crop. This contributes to dense smog in Delhi and the surrounding areas every winter. The Pacific storm Otis has rapidly intensified into a Category 4 hurricane. This is as it nears Mexico's southern Pacific coast. The hurricane now has wind speeds of around 233 kilometers per hour. It's projected to make a potentially catastrophic Category 5 landfall near Acapulco in Mexico. Mexico has issued hurricane warnings and deployed over 8,000 troops to assist those affected. Italian climate activists held protests dressed as the fictional character Pinocchio. They were protesting Italy's climate change inaction. Approximately 100 members of the group called Extinction Rebellion highlighted inconsistencies in the Italian government's climate policies. They also carried a large papier-mâché Pinocchio puppet perched on oil barrels holding a burning earth. Moving to sports, let's start with updates from the Cricket World Cup. South Africa put on a brilliant batting display as they beat Bangladesh by 149 runs in yesterday's match. Quinton de Kock smashed 174 runs in 140 balls, and South Africa put up a total of 382 runs after batting first. Henrik Klaasen and Aiden Markham also scored half-centuries to take South Africa to the mammoth total. Bangladesh lost wickets early, which took away the momentum from their chase. The Tigers were bowled out for 233 runs in the 46th over. Despite losing to South Africa, there was some good news for Bangladesh fans. During their run chase, batter Mahmudullah scored 111 runs, the highest for his team. The second highest score for the Tigers came from opener Liton Das, who scored just 22 runs. After the match, Mahmudullah said that he was happy with his performance. At 37, he has now become the 6th oldest cricketer to score a century. Sri Lanka's Tilakaratne Dilshan tops the list for scoring a century at the age of 38.5 years. Veteran all-rounder Angelo Matthews is all set to join the Sri Lankan playing 11 at the World Cup. He will replace injured pacer Mathisha Pathirana. Pathirana suffered a shoulder injury and has already missed the games against Australia and the Netherlands. Matthews will be seen in action tomorrow as Sri Lanka play England in the Indian city of Bengaluru. Australian batter Travis Head is all set to join their World Cup squad. He's arrived in India for the tournament after recovering from a fractured hand. If Travis Head is included in the playing 11, he'll take charge as opener. This will move Mitch Marsh to the third batting position. Afghanistan fast bowler Naveen-ul Haq says he will not retract his decision to retire after the ongoing World Cup. The 24-year-old says he wants to focus his upcoming years on T20 cricket. However, the pacer added that he was happy to see Afghanistan put up a good fight at the World Cup. Naveen says he will remember this World Cup for the rest of his life. Let's move to updates from football. Arsenal beat Sevilla 2-1 at the UEFA Champions League match yesterday. Gabriel Martinelli scored for Arsenal 3 minutes into first half injury time. In the second half, Gabriel Jesus scored the second goal for the Gunners. In an attempted fightback, Sevilla came back with 1 goal from Nemanja Gudali. German giants Bayern Munich had a 3-1 dominating win over Galatasaray in yesterday's match. Bayern earned an early lead with a goal in just the 8th minute. Turkish side Galatasaray scored on a penalty to equalize the scores in the first half itself. Then English striker Harry Kane scored a goal for Bayern to give them the lead in the second half. In the 79th minute, Bayern scored their third goal to seal the win. Spanish side Real Madrid beat Portuguese club Braga 2-1 in the Champions League. Rodrigo scored for Real in the 16th minute. In the second half, Jude Bellingham made it 2-0 in favor of Real Madrid. Braga attempted a comeback as Alvaro Jallo scored in the 63rd minute, but hosts Braga were not able to score any more as they conceded defeat. In badminton, Indian shuttler PV Sindhu has advanced to the round of 16 at the French Open. She beat world number 7 Gregoria Tunjung after the first set. Sindhu ended up winning the next 2 sets at 21-18, 21-15. She will next be seen in action tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Indian men's duo of Chirag Shetty and Satwik Sairaj Rankireddy also won at the French Open. They beat their French counterparts 21-13, 21-13 in a lopsided contest. Moving to entertainment news, the Hollywood Actors Union is set to engage in further negotiations with major studios today. The negotiations began yesterday after a 2-week pause. Representatives from major studios, including Netflix, Disney, and NBC Universal, were in attendance. The Hollywood actors have been on strike since this July. The Grevin Museum in Paris is set to reintroduce actor Dwayne Johnson's wax statue today. The decision follows complaints that the statue's complexion appeared too light-skinned. Johnson, also known as The Rock, had responded by saying his team would look into the matter. The museum staff has now reportedly made the wax statue's complexion more realistic. American media personality Paris Hilton expressed her strong disapproval over the targeting of her child. She took to social media after a netizen posted hurtful comments about the size of her son's head. Hilton said that her son was healthy and that her heart was deeply pained at the comments. Jisoo, a member of the K-pop group Blackpink, and Korean actor An Bo-hyun have parted ways after dating for 3 months. Jisoo's agency, YG Entertainment, confirmed the news. The reason for the breakup has been attributed to their busy and demanding work schedules. The agency said that this created a natural distance. American actor Richard Roundtree has passed away at the age of 81. He was battling pancreatic cancer. The actor worked in Hollywood for about 5 decades and was known for his role in the film series Shaft. He also worked on The Haunting of Mary Celeste, Chicago Fire, and Desperate Housewives. That's all for this episode of Fast and Factual. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to Firstpost.